Hi, and welcome to this PowerShell tutorial video. So in this video, we're actually going to be taking the server 2022 that we installed on our laptop, or in your case, it could be a desktop, a laptop, or a VM, and we're going to be actually configuring our HyperV service on it. We're going to be enabling remote desktop. We're going to be setting the time zone as well. If the video doesn't stretch out that far, we can add the time zone at the end, but we're also going to be setting a static IP address on our server as well. So we're going to be doing all of that completely through PowerShell remoting. So we're going to actually just on the laptop here on the screen right now, just going to show you that all those things are not set up. And then we're actually going to be going on a Windows 11 machine, and we are going to be using PowerShell remoting to remote into the server and then actually configure the entire thing. So we're going to be enabling remote desktop, configuring the firewall rule to allow remote desktop. We're going to be also setting the IP address and then installing Hyper-V and the Hyper-V tools, and then creating our Hyper-V external switch as well. And then if we still have time, setting the time zone as well, which I think we'll have time in for that in this video. And then in the next videos, we're actually going to be configuring some Hyper-V VMs through PowerShell as well. But today we are just setting up that environment completely through PowerShell. So you actually don't need to be on that physical server or the laptop. You can actually be doing that completely remotely through PowerShell. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started here. So right here on the screen, you guys are going to see that I do have that server that we built in the last video. So we do have a JP HyperV 2022. It's still part of the work group, and that's going to stay that way for us. Currently, we are in the Pacific time zone. I actually live on the Eastern time zone, so we're going to be changing that. But we also see here that remote desktop is disabled. We also see that the Wi-Fi is IPv4 assigned by DHCP, and the IPv6 is enabled. So we're actually going to disable the IPv6. In our case, if you guys use IPv6 where you are, you can definitely just change it for that instead. But we are going to be showing how to do an IPv4 today. And then we are going to be installing all those different roles. It's kind of hard to see, but as you can see, the Hyper-V role is not installed. We do not see it on the side here. So let's go ahead and let's actually go over to the next, another screen here. And this is my Windows 11 machine. This is the machine that we've been using for tons of the videos that we've been doing. So this is just the Windows 11 machine, no magic there. And we have our PowerShell window. Make sure that you do have it open in administrator mode. This will be very, very important for this video because there will be something we have to do since the server is not joined to a domain. And actually, neither is this Windows 11 machine. So if both machines are joined to the same domain, you don't have this problem. But I'd rather cover it this way. If you guys do get this prompt, you guys will know what to do. So let's go ahead and let's actually get started with some code here. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is try to get our session started, our PS session started with our server. So for that, we are going to do a new -PS session. PS session. And we are going to put in the computer name as JP HyperV 2022. Now this would just be your machine name, whatever you had named it. If you named it the exact same thing, that you could put the exact same name. And we are going to put the credential. We are going to put the name of administrator, since it is just the local administrator that we have on that computer. And if we actually try to run this here, it's going to prompt us for the password. I'm just going to put that in. And this would be the administrator password that you set when we actually installed Server 2022 on it. So here we actually get our error message. Now this is what I was actually expecting because the machines are not on a domain, so they aren't trusted. And what it actually gives you is kind of some complex word that says that you need to add it to the trusted host list, but it doesn't really tell you how to do that. It tells you to use the winrm command. So I'm going to actually show you guys how to add that to the trusted list and how to look at your trusted list right now. So what we actually need to do first is let's actually look at what is in our trusted hosts list right now. So let's do a get item, and then we're going to do a WS man colon /localhost /client /trusted hosts. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually run this here. And here we actually have, I actually have 2 machines in my trusted host, but we actually do not have JP HyperV in here. So if I actually go ahead and just go ahead and just pipe that here to select value, we're going to see that a little bit better. So there we have the two values that we have for servers in my trusted host or machines in my trusted host. So now we actually need to add the JP HyperV 2022. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to do a set dash item WS man colon /localhost /client /trusted hosts. And then we're going to put in the parameter of value. And then for that value, we are going to put JP HyperV 2022, which is the name of our server. And all we actually want to do as well is add another parameter called concatenate. This way it will not overwrite your trusted hosts currently. Very important if you already have some in there to add that concatenate option. And then all we're going to do as well is do a confirm false. This way it doesn't prompt us to confirm. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to run that here. And actually, it's still going to ask us to confirm. We could probably put in a force in there. So we're just going to answer Y. And that is going to be good. So now if we actually run that get item here at the top, we are going to see that we get a JP HyperV 2022 in there. So we should be all good to go. So what we're going to do, now that I know that's going to work, we're going to create a variable called session, and we're going to make that equal to our new PS session with our computer name and our credential of administrator here. We are going to run this, and it's going to ask us for our password again. So we're just going to put that in here. Now, of course, you can create a credential object, so you don't always have to re-enter this. But there we are. No error codes here. So everything seems to work correctly. Now all we need to do is we need to enter in that PS session. So we're going to do an enter PS session. And we're going to do the session, which is in our session variable here. And now we're going to pay attention at the bottom here. So we see how it says PS C scripts home lab configure server remotely. Once we actually run this here, we are going to see it changes to JP HyperV 2022, and we're in the C users administrator documents, which is just the home directory for our administrator account that we logged into. So now we are actually on this server that we've created, that we've set up the other day. So the first thing that we're going to want to do actually is set up the remote desktop. And this way I can actually show you guys live every time that we make a change. Through PowerShell, I'm going to show you guys the change actually happening on the remote desktop so we can actually see how it looks like. So as you guys saw in the last screen, remote desktop was disabled. So let's go ahead and let's actually fix that. So we're going to do a set dash item property. And we are going to do a path here. And this path is going to be the HKLM colon /system /current control set /control /terminal server. And then we are going to go ahead and we're going to put the parameter of name. And the name we are going to put in here is going to be lowercase f deny with an uppercase D, uppercase TS, uppercase C for connections. So this is how you're going to want to type it out. So lowercase f, uppercase D, lowercase e n y, uppercase t s c, lowercase o n n e c t i o n s. And then we're going to put in the parameter value, and we are going to give it the value of 0. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to run this here. And then all we want to do now is also set up the firewall rule to make sure that we actually allow remote desktop. Now, sometimes this is usually done automatically, but I like to also just make sure that we do it. So enable net firewall rule, and it's going to be for the display group of remote desktop. So if we actually go ahead and we run this here, so everything is ran. So now if we actually go in here, we go into our remote desktop here, and I'm going to type in JP HyperV 2022. We get our prompt. It comes up as administrator already. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to put in our password in here. And this should come up. So this is, we're just going to click on yes here. And here is our server. And here we can actually see it is remote desktop is enabled here. So if we actually just zoom in here actually a little bit, we can actually see the remote desktop is enabled now. So that is working correctly. So we can actually just go ahead and we can actually minimize this remote desktop window. We're going to keep it open just so we can actually see all the changes that we're doing. So then the other thing that we can do right off the bat that I like to do anyways is I like to give our server a static IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a get net adapter here first. So get net adapter. And what we want to do here is this is going to show us our Wi-Fi card and our Ethernet. And the most important thing to pay attention to here is this IF index. So here we can actually see our IF index for our Wi-Fi card for us is 2. So if you're using an Ethernet connection for everything, you would pay attention to the 7. But in our case, because we are using Wi-Fi, we want to pay attention to the 2 here instead of the 7. And the Wi-Fi, the name of our net adapter is Wi-Fi. So that is also important to pay attention to. In some cases, it could be Wi-Fi 2 if you're using a dongle as well instead of your built-in Wi-Fi card. And then the other thing that we're going to want to run here is getting the IP address currently in there. So we're going to do a get net IP address. And this is going to give us all the details of our connections on our machine here. So let's go ahead and let's just look at it. So here we have our interface index of 2, which is our Wi-Fi index here. We have currently an IP address of 172.30.123.4. And it is DHCP. So we are actually going to go ahead and we are going to create a static address here. So let's go ahead and let's just make sure that nothing is taking up an address first. Now, of course, this would require you to know, like my home Wi-Fi right now gives out these addresses. So I know that I can actually pick any address from 172.30.123.2 all the way to .254, I believe, is what mine will give out. Maybe 253. I can't 100% remember what I have it set to and what I've already have connected on it. But we just want to make sure that the IP address that we want to give it is actually available. So we want to make sure that we don't get any ping back on it. So to do that is we actually just do a test connection And I'm going to try to give it a 172.30.123.45 address. So let's just go ahead and let's try that connection here. It should actually fail, and it does. That's because there is nothing using that IP address. So we should be all good to go. So what we're going to do here is we are now going to create a new net IP address. So we're going to do a new -net IP address, and we are going to do our interface index. And our interface index, if we remember correctly, if we do a get net adapter, is 2 in this case. So you always have to make sure of that, because every time that you install your server OS, that will actually be different. So I've done this like 3 or 4 times, and every time it's been different. So always make sure that you verify what your interface index is. And then we're going to put the IP address. We want the 172.30.123.45. We are going to put the prefix length of 24 for us. And we are going to want to go ahead and put the default gateway as the 172.30.123.1. And this prefix length is for the subnet mask 255.255.255.0, just in case you were wondering what this prefix length stands for. So let's go ahead and let's run this. Now what you will notice is it should work fine. So that should be all good. And on the remote desktop here, if we actually refresh it, we will actually see that the IP address is now 172.30.123.45. But if I actually look here, yeah, everything seems fine. So if we actually click on this and we go in here, go into properties, go into the IPv4. So everything is looking good here. We aren't setting any DNS addresses. That we're going to be actually setting that with the next command here, which is quite important as well. You just always want to make sure you have those. Everything will most likely work just fine, even if you don't have it. The only thing that will happen here is if we go ahead and just try to use the internet here. Give me 1 second. Let's go ahead and let's go to google.com. You will get that you cannot access the internet. Now, your computer will still be able to access it, and that is because you're connected on the local network. You're just not connected to the actual internet, which is why we want to set up these DNS servers. So we're going to be doing that in the next step here. So let's go ahead and let's just minimize out of this remote desktop window. And let's go back to our remote PowerShell session here. And what we want to do to set up those DNS addresses here is actually a set-DNS client server address. And again, it's going to ask you to specify the interface index, which for us it is 2. And then the server addresses, we're going to put 8.8.8.8, comma 8.8.4.4. These are just the Google DNSs. If you prefer using your own pair of DNSs, either from your internet service provider, from Cloudflare, you can use any DNS entries in here. So if we actually run that here, we go back into our RDP session. We can actually then go in here, go into properties. If we look at our IPv4 and we just zoom in here, we will see that the DNS settings are actually properly set. So everything is working correctly. And if we actually go ahead and just zoom back out here and we try to go to google.com, it is now working correctly. So we have our IP, our static IP set. We also have our DNS set as well. We have our remote desktop enabled. So now let's go ahead and let's disable the IPv6. Now, this is not something you have to do, but if you do actually do this on your production environment, some places actually do turn off the IPv6 interface. So let's do a get net adapter binding. And then what we want to do here is actually pipe this over to a where-object. And we want to look for the component ID dash equals, and we're going to be looking for ms underscore TCP IP 6. So if we actually go ahead and we run this code here, we are going to see that we get our Ethernet and our Wi-Fi has both the TCP IPv6 here. All we're really worried about is because on our server, we're just using Wi-Fi. All we want to do is do a disable.net adapter binding, and the name is going to be on our Wi-Fi adapter. So we're going to put Wi-Fi here, and then we're going to do the component ID that we want to disable is the ms underscore TCP IP 6. And if we run this here, now what this will sometimes do as well is you might notice your RDP session hang for a little bit here. So there it is, it's just hanging, and it should usually come back within a few seconds here. So we're just going to wait a little bit and wait for this session to come back. And there it is, it's already back here. So if we actually just refresh this, we can see that the IPv6 enabled has actually disappeared. If we actually just zoom in here, you guys can actually see it. If we click on here, we actually look at the properties of our card. IPv6 has actually been unchecked. So everything is working correctly so far. So the only thing left to do is install our HyperV tools, create our VM switch, and set up our time zone. So what I'm actually going to do is do the time zone first, because the HyperV will actually require a restart. So let's go ahead and let's look at the different time zones that are available. So the way to do that is actually do a get. And what you might notice actually is when you're manipulating some of the IP addresses or the net cards, you might notice that it kind of gets stuck at the bottom here. All you need to do is do a Control C. And that will typically kick you out of the session here. I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. Might take a little bit more time than normal. I might force, oh, there it is. So now we've exited out, and we are back in our PS session here. So that is all good. So let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and let's do our get time zone here. So get time zone, and we're going to do a dash list available. Now this will show us all the available time zones. So this will be quite a lot here. So what I am going to do is I'm going to say we're going to pipe that to a where-object. And we're going to say standard name is dash like, and we're going to put 2 stars here. We're going to do dash Eastern is like Eastern. So that should show us a so Eastern Standard Time, US and Canada here. So we have our ID here, which is just Eastern Standard Time. So if we actually go ahead and we do this and we do our set time zone and we do the ID and we do Eastern Standard Time, We go ahead and we push this through. If we go on our RDP session here, we're going to see it is now set to Eastern time. If I just zoom in real fast here, and we just scroll over, we can see that it is set to Eastern time. So everything is working properly there. So now all we have left to do is install our Hyper-V and actually configure Hyper-V here. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a so I already know the feature names, but I'm just going to show you guys how to do that again. So it is just get Windows feature, and this will actually list out all the list of available Windows features. This is how we did the wireless networking earlier on in the previous video. So what we're going to want to install is the Hyper-V management tools, but also the Hyper-V tool as well here, which is the Hyper-V role, which is up here, just here. So what we actually want to do is do a install -Windows feature. We're going to do the name, and we're going to do Hyper-V. And then what we're also going to want to do right after is we're going to do a install -Windows feature name, and we're going to install the rsat-hyper-v tools. And after this commandlet, what we're going to do is we're going to do the -restart parameter, and we're going to go ahead, we're actually just going to run this here. Now what this is actually going to do, we're going to see it's going to start the installation. So as we can see, the progress bar is just loading up the percentages here. So it's going to be installing the Hyper-V and the rsat tools. Now, if you would have put the parameter of restart after the first one, it would have installed the first one and then restarted the server right away. So that's why I always put the restart on the last install Windows feature. This way, if it needs to be restarted, it'll restart, and it'll only restart at the end. So once this is all done, the server will restart because Hyper-V does require a restart. And we are, so there it is. The remote desktop session has ended. The remote computer is restarting. And we actually even got kicked out of our PS session here. So let's just go ahead and let's wait a little bit here for it to come back online. The laptop is actually just right in front of me here. So we're going to know right away once it's back. And when it is back, we're just going to show that the Hyper-V role is installed. And then what we're actually going to do is create our Hyper-V external switch. This way we can actually access the internet on our VMs that we will be creating. So let's just go ahead and let's just wait for that. This might take a few minutes because it does install. It kind of completes the install on the reboot. Sometimes that can take a few minutes. So I'm just going to pause the recording and we'll be right back once that comes back up. All right, so the laptop is booted back up here. So all we need to do now is actually go ahead and relaunch our session here. So let's go back up here. We're going to launch our session into our session variable, type in our password. And we are in. Let's go ahead. Let's enter the PS session. So we're actually in the computer. And all we're going to do before we actually create this switch here, all I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up a remote desktop session to that computer just to show that the role is actually installed here. Let's go ahead and let's connect to it. And we go ahead, we go on local server here. Once it starts actually loading in, we will actually see the Hyper-V role should come up here. And there it is. The Hyper-V role is actually there. It is installed. And if we come at the bottom here and type in Hyper-V, we actually get our Hyper-V manager. And just to show you guys right now, if we go into the virtual switch manager, there is no external switch created. So we need to do that external switch. Now, sometimes the external switch using Wi-Fi will give you an issue. If it gives us the issue, I will show you guys how to fix it. If not, I will just mention it, how I've gone past some of those problems. Usually, if you do it through PowerShell, the problem does not appear, but if you're doing it through the GUI, that is usually when it appears. But let's go ahead and try to create that VM, that virtual switch with the external capabilities here. So we're going to do a new -VM switch, and we're going to do the name as, we're going to put in external here, and then we're going to do a net adapter name, and our net adapter name is going to be Wi-Fi because that is our net adapter name that we're using. And then all we want to make sure is allow management OS, and we're going to set that to true here. And let's go ahead and let's run this. Now, what this will often also do is also cut access to the RDP session, usually again for like a split second or two. So let's just let it do its thing here. So let's just minimize this. It's still going on. And there it is. We've lost our connection here, and it should just come back within a few minutes. Well, a few seconds, I should say. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that that external switch is created. So there it is. It's already back. If we go look here, you will see that it is still kind of frozen on our PowerShell remoting session. This is very similar to modifying a network card at any time. Like, it can get frozen, so you might have to hit Control-C. But what I like to do before hitting Control-C on this one is just going to go look in the virtual switch manager, and we can actually see our external switch is already created here. So let me just zoom in for you guys so you guys can actually see that here. So there is our external switch. It is connected to our Wi-Fi here, our Wi-Fi card. So everything is working as expected. We have completely configured this server using PowerShell. From the beginning, we even did the name through PowerShell as well when we were physically on the computer. And we just did that so it's a bit easier to connect to it later on when we change the name of it. With the PS session, that's usually the only part that I really like to do directly on the PC. But by all means, you could do the entire thing completely through PS session if you just change the name. All you need to do is then at that point add it to trusted host. You'd have to add the temporary name and then the name that you actually are configuring it to. That is the only difference of why it's a little bit more steps that way. But you guys have learned how to set up a static IP address, set up the DNS, set up the remote desktop, some firewall rules, install a Windows feature all remotely. And the next up, we're going to be configuring some virtual machines as well. And then on those virtual machines, we're going to be using the PowerShell desired state configuration. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I know that this was a longer video than normal. If you guys have any comments or questions, please let me know below in the comment section. I will try my best to answer all of those. And if it's something that can benefit a lot of people, I will make a video on it. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, also hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.